Hello quilters! Today we're going to do a snowflake placemat, and it's an applique project, so you can do it with your embroidery machine, but it does incorporate a little bit of quilting on the background. The way that I went about this is I got a snowflake embroidery, and you can go to your search engine and find plenty of these. You just look in embroidery designs and they'll pop up. And then I went to Designs by Juju, and I've chose a background snowflake quilt pattern to go behind it. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell for more compulsive quilting and embroidery videos. So this is the beginning of the snowflake project, and what I have here is a hoop that's set up. This is my 360 by 350 hoop. It's a very large hoop, and but this is just going to be snowflakes for a placemat. So I basically want a, maybe two on one side and one, just kind of a triangular type design. And I also want some quilting in this. And so I'm going to try this project and see how it goes as far as getting all of those things. Now the next thing that I want to do is I've got some white-ish fabrics, and I want to consider different fabrics to go with this. And in general, although snowflakes are pure white, when I'm doing quilts, I like something with a little pattern. So I have these. They have, like, this one is a very white, and these are more creams, but with dots. I think I'm going to move away from these and go with these that have a little bit more pattern, just because it will add more interest, and I'll use these for my snowflakes on the pattern. After I have made my choices as far as my fabrics, the next thing I'm going to do is I usually will pull out some thread, and these are in the family that I'm looking for, and I will make some choices. So these are usually made in combination. I want something that's going to look pretty all by itself, but I also want it to go along with these. Now I'm going to exclude the red color because I just think it would be too jarring. I'm going to have enough red that's in the pattern. But as far as an emphasis color, I think I'm going to exclude these two. I don't think these are right. I could either go very light like this, or a little bit darker. And this one is kind of right in between the two of them. So what I'm doing is just kind of looking at how they'll look against the thread or against the other fabrics. All of them kind of blend into this one. They'll get a little bit more emphasis. So it all depends on whether I want more emphasis or whether I want things a little bit darker. I think I'm leaning toward this intermediate blue here, and I'm going to drop these aside, although these look very good with the fabric too. When you're working on embroidery, one of the things that can help speed you along, if you've got something large like this in a split design, is to go ahead and do all of your trace first, and then pull your embroidery out of the, or your hoop out of your embroidery arm, and then you can skip back to where you need to go. So for example, on this, these are my color stops, and my first color stop would be the trace that goes on the hoop, and then the second one is the trace that you lay right here. So the second trace gives you the outline to where you're going to cut for an applique, and then the third one, for example, would be the one that is the final stitch out that you'll see on the outside. The first one goes on the bottom and shows you where to place your fabric. The second one secures your fabric to your embroidery, and then the third is the embroidery itself. And so if you want to skip down to the second one, like I've done, you notice I have two pieces of fabric here, and they've both had the first and the second trace. So now I will pull them out of the embroidery arm and take them over and cut them out. So I have my tack down stitches laid in, and I've brought it over to the table and began cutting. And as you can see, you have to have a real high tolerance for turning the hoop many different times when you have a design like this that has many ins and outs as you're cutting. If you have a scanning cut or a different cutting machine, this will be a fantastic place to use one. You would of course need some embroidery machine software that works with your cutter to make that possible. I love doing applique, but I haven't got to the point where the cost to benefit ratio of buying a cutting machine would be justified for me. So at this time, I'm just sticking to the old-fashioned couple of pairs of applique scissors as I work around my project. When you get to the center of your design, one of the things you want to be really careful about is just to work the point of your scissors into the top fabric so that you don't cut into your background fabric. One of the things that you might notice is I've got two pairs of applique scissors. One is a little bit sharper, and that is the reason I use it sometimes when I'm trying to get into a point. And the small pair, the silver pair, has a curved edge, and this curved edge can ride along the top of the stitches without cutting into them, and so I always have it curved away from the stitches. The other tool that I'm using is a needle puller or a pair of hemostats, and I'm using it to pull tension as I go around the applique. These are great to get into tight areas that you're working in. They're also great for grabbing threads when you're working, and some stores will carry these, sewing stores, and you can also find them online in medical supplies. I finished up the design and I've turned it back to the side one, which is where there's two pieces, and then I have laid out a quilting design. This one is from Designs by Juju, and it's a snowflake design. And I've also decided to switch out my thread, so I'm going to take the blue out and I'm going to put in the gray. And I think this will be, well, it's not really gray, it's more of a silver, but we'll see. I think it might be a nice complement to this and the snowflake design. The way that I embroidered this is I first did the applique and did all the stitches for it, and then I just came back with the quilting design and went over the entire design to include the applique. So it has little bits of the quilting on it. I also reduced the size of this quilting pattern just a little bit. So the quilting pattern is reduced. Just to be fair to the design, I went and did a second one. And what I've done with it is, let me bring it in here. I enlarged the design a little bit. If you can see here, the design of the quilting, the snowflakes, they're just a little bit bigger. This is not exactly, I enlarged it, I just took it straight from the design pattern. So this is a little bit larger. I hope that the light is working well for this so that you can see it. What this design is not exactly what I expected, because if you can see around the edges of the snowflake, the stitches are a little bit tighter, and then they're just a tiny bit longer everywhere else. If you compare this, let me bring something in for comparison here. So this is a design that was that I have worked on a little while ago. It's not by the same company, but if you can notice, it's either a double or triple stitch. So the stitches really stand out. And a lot of people, when they are doing quilting, don't necessarily want the stitches to stand out as much. They want it to be a background element. So what this, but if you'll notice, every single stitch is the exact same length. And that is one of the things that you can really get into with computerized quilting. This is, one of the designs that came with my machine, but this one is, it's made by a different designer, and they made different design choices. Like I said, it's not a double or a triple stitch, so it's more of a background element. And I do like that when it came to doing this, because it doesn't really show much on the applique if you want something to just run over the top. I'm always a little bit reluctant to do a design like this where something goes over my applique because I've taken such a long time in putting it together, and a lot of times I want the applique itself to poof. And so if you've got this holding it down, it's not going to poof very much. This next one, I've put down this as a background, and then I'm just going to sew the applique on the top. There is a third way that I'm not going to do this, that you could do it, and that is to delete the sections where your applique is going to go. It's just a different way to do it. You're just basically erasing sections and then setting your applique on top of it. But for this, I just wanted it to be as simple as could be for a demonstration, so I'm not going to do that. As I'm working on this, you can hear the embroidery machine running in the background. That's one of the beauties of having an embroidery machine, is it can do some of the work for you while you're working on other things. I folded away the front and I'm cutting the backing and the binding that held the embroidery project in the hoop. I want a square placemat, so I'm just going to be folding this in and making it self-binding. I'm going to have to cut this border that I've left in half. So what I ended up doing here is I've cut this to 1 inch. So this was folded over from the front to the back. And this is, normally you might fold your back over, but I thought that the front was prettier, and also it's a darker color, so I wanted to fold it over to the back. The white would end up getting stained a lot faster. Now, what I'm doing here is self-binding. So here's an edge that's already been self-bound. So I've just basically folded it in and mitered the corner here. One of the things that you might want to consider with this is cutting out a little bit of the bulk as you go. So I have, this is folded, it's folded twice. So I could easily come in here and take some of this out, and that's going to make it easier to fold in and under. So this part is not going to show. Let me turn it this way. So when I fold it up like this, I'm going to fold it to the side like this, and I've got this piece here. And I'm going to fold it back and then turn this up. You may have to work with this just a little bit because you want to get that nice mitered corner right there. And then you want to take it back to the sewing machine. Just put a clip on it. And you want to do the same with the next corner. And you'll get your corner in there. So now for a wrap up of how the project went. The binding bound to the outside, I wasn't as pleased with it. I still would prefer the darker color for the binding rather than have a lighter color. The reason I don't want the back side of the placemat is because it is a white fabric, and it will, the edges of quilts inevitably will get some hard use. A little darker color is a little better color for that purpose. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell for more compulsive quilting and embroidery videos.